Dr. Kim Coder, who is a professor of tree biology and healthcare and University Hill Fellow for Distinguished Public Service and Outreach at the Warnell School of Forestry and Natural Resources. Among his many career achievements, Dr. Coder was the first person to receive 4 of the International Society for Arboriculture World Awards, the Shigo, Harris, Lilly, and Merit Awards. Granted the Arbor Day Foundation's highest award, the Sterling Morton Award as well. Awarded the Mary Helen Ray Legacy Award by the Georgia Tree Council. Excuse me. Dr. Coder has been an international lecturer and a consultant on tree biology and structure, tree health, biomechanics and storm damage, and urban ecosystem. Welcome, Kim. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. We need to talk about trees, and remember, as we talk about trees, I only do trees. So in your questions, please be gentle because I don't do anything other than trees. The website at the Warnell School, if you just type in Warnell Outreach Publications, there is a keyword search for hundreds of publications that deal with trees, tree sites, communities, and how they deal with trees, particularly tree healthcare or arboriculture, and tree biology is there. So we need to understand trees. We need to be tree literate. When you talk to people, sometimes you realize that they're not very literate. Sometimes they're talking about things that they know nothing about. We need to be tree literate if we're going to deal with trees, because trees are not tomatoes. They're not root crops. They're not row crops. They're not bench crops. They're a completely separate thing that can last 3 generations of humans or longer. So we need to be specific about what we understand about trees. And remember that in trees, they are a lot like us. They have an establishment phase, a rapid growth phase, and some of us, like me, are in our rapid growth phase still. A mature phase that can last anywhere from 20 to 300 years, and then D&D, decline and death. So trees go through this life cycle, and at each life cycle, we have different treatments, different fertilizations, different pruning activities. We also need to remember that what's alive in a tree, most of the tree standing out there is dead. The outside is dead, the inside is dead. There, in this particular image, you can see that about 5% of what is called sapwood, the lighter colored wood around the outside, has living cells. And in the heartwood, in the middle of it, there's no living cells that belong to the tree. And just remember that there is a living skin over the top of a dead skeleton in trees. Trees are modular and segmented. It's a lot like the old toy Tinker Toys, the round nodes and the long internodes.
Hey, Kim, can I interrupt for a second?
Absolutely.
Could you share your screen?
What?
Yes, we have been just looking at you, which is really good.
Oh my God. I'm sorry.
Fine.
It has been, are you seeing it now?
Yes. Thank you.
What a tragedy, you know? Anyway, we haven't missed a lot, but trees are segmented. They are modular. And because of this, I am going to pop back to this is the first image that I really had. The green part is living tissue, and about 5 to 7% of the sapwood is living. The inside of the tree is dead. The outside of the tree is dead. And we have nodes. Nodes and internodes. It's like Tinker Toys, that you have everywhere a bud comes out, a twig comes out, a leaf comes out. You have a node, which is a weak point, where you're transferring loads and all these materials out to whatever the organ is, and then internodes, the space in between that allows or shows growth. We also have branch and twig autonomy in trees. There's no welfare system in a tree. There's no help. A lower branch will not help an upper branch. A tree can be thought of as not necessarily one organism, but a whole bunch of independent contractors working together. Trees do not heal, bleed, or feed. You can't feed a tree. They have to feed themselves. They don't bleed because it's not a pressurized system or a circulation system, and they don't heal. We have a lot of people that talk about trees healing. They can't heal, and because they can't heal, they can only grow over and continue on. Once you damage a tree, it's damaged forever. The storm that comes through will damage the tree forever. And if we take a look at roots, the active part of the tree, or it could be roots or roots, depending upon where you come from. If we take the 6 inches of soil off the top of the around a tree, we can get 3 primary functional root system descriptions. One is the big mommy and daddy roots, the big roots right at the base of the tree. And we're looking on this image down from the top. And as we see these big, rapidly tapering trees, that's the root plate, the structural root plate that holds the tree up against the wind. Then we have the long, straight, woody roots that most of us see. And then we have ephemeral roots. These roots last 2 to 4 weeks. They're the fuzzy things that you don't get to see because there's not roots in them. I'm sorry, there's not wood in them. And so they go out and absorb things as it flows from the surface of the surface of the soil down through all the soil pores. These annual absorbing roots are positioned there. And again, they turn over every couple of weeks. In upland trees, they may last a month. In bottomland trees, they may turn over in 2 weeks. And then with these 3 roots, the root plate, structural roots, the woody transport roots, the wood long roots that go out 2 to 5 times the height of the tree away from the tree, and the absorbing roots, the absorbing root fans that are just there for a little bit. And remember, these roots are very shallow and go out a long way because they need tremendous amounts of oxygen. Turf roots, grass species, roots will go way below tree roots. Tree roots are shallow because they need the oxygen. Now, there's a couple myths that we have. You know, Santa Claus is a franchise that was sold to Walmart. The Easter Bunny has been made into barbecue by your local barbecue place, and taproots. These are all myths. A taproot is a juvenile feature on a tree. Big, large trees do not have taproots. The only reason a taproot exists is to see how deep the soil is. Trees are not stupid like a cow or a dog. Trees know how much ecological space they have because they sent a root tip to look. And the taproot goes down until it hits 5% oxygen or something hard, and it sends a message to release all the rest of the roots. And so taproots are just a juvenile thing. But yet we have people, when they go to mess with trees, they'll cut off all the other active roots and leave this dead carrot that's down there that's called the taproot. Don't become obsessed with depth. You got to think horizontal, not vertical. The other thing to remember about trees, if we're going to assess health and structure, is trees can never be better than the site they're on. If you go out to a big box store, a fancy garden store, and get this fancy cultivar, you get a cultivar that you've paid a lot of money for, a fancy tree, bring it home and put it in a crappy site. Within 3 years, your tree will be crappy because it can't be better than its site. If you're going to have a great tree, you need a great site. Now, this image that you can't really see because it's called a professor slide, that I can make up all kinds of sayings about it because you can't really see what it's saying. But what this is saying is too much or too little will kill you. So the bars and the thickness of the bars describe how much stress and strain a tree is under. And you notice the top 3 stressors in a tree are water availability, drought and flood, too much, too little, soil drainage, excessive or poor drainage, and soil aeration, heavy CO2, and then a bunch of oxygen. So if you could manage for 80% of all the tree stress, it would be water availability, drainage, and aeration. That is normally in tree healthcare our mantra. 80% is water related in trees. Availability, drainage, and aeration. There are some other things in there too that take up the other 20%. Don't play Trivial Pursuit with your tree. If you take care of the big things, many times the little things will take care of themselves. So just remember in the back of your mind, as you're looking at the tree out there in the landscape, 80% of tree stress is water related. Now, before we go on to some storms and other things, we need to hit a couple highlights that are about healthcare and structure. One is getting trees planted correctly. You got to have enough space if you're going to have a tree. If you want a big tree, you got to have a big space. You can't plant a tree in a Dixie cup and expect it to work. That's called a bonsai. And if you've ever taken care of bonsais, you know they need daily or weekly care. We do not want that in a landscape tree. We need to go big and we need to go wide. That also means shallow. Remember, the roots are going wide, shallow, not deep. We have many communities that have even planted or even passed ordinances that say we're going to have this amount of space allowed for trees. They're putting big trees in small spaces. Small spaces only produce small trees, small shade, and small values. If you want big trees, you can't have half a whiskey barrel sitting in the downtown area with a tree in it. You'll have to replace it and go down to begonias. And begonias, they deserve that. Trees don't. We need bigger spaces. If we're going to plant them, remember, you never plant a tree in a hole. It's not about deep in a hole. It's about a saucer. A shallow saucer is how you plant a tree. You got to plant it high. It's got to sit 1 to 2 inches above the general level of the landscape. You go high, never deep. Planting a tree deep is the kiss of death. You shorten your long-term survivability of trees by about 2/3 when you plant too deep. And you got to get everything off the tree when you plant it. You got to remove everything. Bindings, ties, wires, burlap, wrapping. You can't leave things that will get in the way of the tree spreading wide. We don't care if there's stuff in the bottom that could keep it from going down. It's not going down. It's going wide. So you got to keep things from girdling it and getting in the way of it. All right, if that's tree planting, what about tree pruning? This is one of the things we do often with trees to meet objectives of our clients, of our landscapes. But the general rule is that we're pruning the young trees too much, and we only prune the old ones abusively after cleaning up from a storm when something has failed. So we got to do a better job of, through the life of a tree, through the life pattern of a tree, pruning it when it needs it. Appropriate response. Don't wait. Every year, every 5 years, every 10 years, you should be making an appropriate response on how we prune trees. Now, remember, when a branch is hooked into the side of a stem or a branch hooked into another branch, where they meet at the top end, that is called a stem-branch confluence. The growth regulators and the sugars, the food produced by the stem and the branch, meet in a turbulent zone where the branch comes into the stem. That's a node. And the stem will hold the branch on with a stem flange. That's tissue placed around the base of the branch to hold it on. And that stem flange belongs to the stem. It's not part of the branch. And so we normally do a 3-cut method. We back cut to prevent tearing of the branch downward, which is just a hideous thing for a tree to recover from. We take the weight of the branch off, because you don't want a 40-pound wet branch blowing in the wind as you're trying to make a fine pruning cut. And then you go down to where the branch starts to curve up on the top side into the branch chine, the bark ridge. And on the bottom, where you start to notice a swelling of the edge of the flange, you want to prune outside of those targets and make a fine pruning cut. So back cut, take the weight off and make a fine pruning cut beyond the stem flange. You don't flush cut. Flush cut is where you make a cut level with the stem or the connecting node, and you cut in to the stem above and below. You cut into the defensive zone. You're cutting stem and branch. When you're pruning, you only want to cut the branch. Leave the stem alone. And stub cuts. Some people get obsessed about, well, if I cannot cut too close, then I'm going to stub it. And stubbing is just leaving a stick of candy out there for everything in the neighborhood. We don't stub cut. We don't flush cut. We properly prune trees. We don't top, tip, head. We don't do any of this kind of stuff. Sometimes people call it hat racking. If you go buy a tree and you can hang your hat on it, that means it was just cut in the internode, just randomly cut, hedged. You hedge a hedge because we hate them. You trim your grass because that's the way you trim grass. You don't trim your tree. You don't round it over or flat top it. You prune it. You prune it always back to the node. Now, if you're going to do a reduction cut, or what's called an abridging cut, where you shorten, not remove, we're going to go a couple fingers, a couple three saw kerfs above the confluence, and that's called the lift line. And we're going to back cut, take the weight of the stem off, and then we're going to make a 30-degree down angle from the lift line, not from the confluence. That's called a reduction cut. This is how we abridge branches. Most branches should not be removed. They should be abridged, which means shortened, not removed. You shorten or abridge back to shade, but always cutting with a proper reduction cut at the node. Don't leave forks. We've been trying to get rid of forks in a lot of different species because forks eventually fail. And in storms and things, we would like to get rid of these forks ahead of time. And that is just good management. Reduce one of the sides, properly cut, abridge one of the sides. And if you see mistletoe, Mistletoe is a parasite. It's a hideous thing. If you would take, if your dog comes in with ticks, would you not take the blood ticks off of them? Mistletoe is a water tick on a tree. We need to kill mistletoe. So anytime you see mistletoe, you go 14 to 16 inches behind where the mistletoe is, then back to the next node and properly prune that branch. Get rid of that mistletoe. Just don't knock it off because it will come back. So what about tree stress and strain? What about tree health and structure? Well, a couple of the things I'd like to hit, because we don't really have a lot of time here to hit everything that messes with trees. One is heat stress. So in abiotic stress and strain, heat stress is a major issue in parking lots, in pavements around houses and downtown areas, strip malls and things. Heat stress. If the tree lives hot, it dies fast. Why do you think the Kmart tree looks like, in its parking lot, looks like the devil? Because that's the best it can look in the site that it's on. Heat stress. And you say, well, why don't I just buy more tropical, subtropical trees? Aren't they going to do better? This is heat optimums for temperate trees and tropical trees. Temperate trees have a optimum about 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Tropicals do about 83. But you notice that they all fall off quickly as we get these 100-degree days. And the point is, photosynthesis ends quickly as you get too much heat reflected from the parking lot or from buildings. And then respiration just climbs. And so the tree is starving to death and will succumb just to the heat load. Remember that when we put a tree out in a parking lot versus in a park, for every 18 degrees Fahrenheit, we increase temperature above 40 degrees where water is the densest. For every 18 degrees, we double the amount of water use and double the amount of food use by the tree. So if you have a tree that's running at 94 degrees, it's cooking itself to death. Good park tree running at 76 degrees, it's probably doing fine. All right. Next thing, abiotic stress, soil compaction. Soil compaction is a hidden killer. And most folks, most clients, most people that have trees, they do not see this. They walk over the surface of it all the time. They don't appreciate it because it's at the ground surface and below. You have packed down the soil so tightly that you can't get oxygen in, CO2 out, water through, or you can't grow a tree root through that soil. So if you think about a deep soil, somewhere down below the soil surface is the dead zone. And that dead zone has less than 5% oxygen in it. And if you start packing down and destroying all of these pore spaces by driving over it, stepping over it, riding your bike over it, putting the car underneath the tree to wash it, if you do that, you're bringing the dead zone closer and closer to the surface through compaction. And it's not 10 years of compacting that does it. It's the first 5 times you do it. The relative compaction on a site, especially if the soil is moist, is the first 4 times you do it. You've packed it down. So again, with soil compaction, we try not to compact, try to keep materials, people, and machinery off the site. Now we're going to talk about some storm damage. whether you're wherever you're at in the Southeast, you're going to get one type of storm damage or another. We have thunderstorms, hurricanes, we have glazing events and ice. We can have tornadoes. We can have these huge rolling fronts called derechos. And up in the mountains and things, we can have ice and snow. We also can have lightning damage, and we can't go into that today because that's kind of a separate subject on its own, is how trees here are damaged and respond to damage and what kind of treatments we can provide. So just generally in biomechanics of trees, how they stand up and how they fall down, the three components for wind load impacts are always the stem and root base, the stem height, how tall is the tree, and how much mass of branches is up there. One of the things to remember about storms is that the wind velocity in miles per hour, you can hear from the airport that it's 20 miles an hour or 30 miles an hour, 40. As we double velocity, we quadruple pressure on the tree. The pressure on the tree is a square value. And so as you double wind velocity, you quadruple pressure on the tree. And this is an example. And on the left-hand side, you have miles per hour. On the right-hand column, you have pounds per square foot on the tree. The pounds per square foot on the canopy, on the branches, on the stem. And notice at about 60 miles an hour, it says T1, that's just threshold. The tree can fall back against the wind. It can streamline. It can pull branches. It can pull leaves that they'll fall back against the wind and make a smaller tree. But at about 55 to 60 miles an hour, it has fallen back just it's about as much as it can. The other threshold, we get about 100 miles an hour, 95 to 105, where we get about 25 to 28 pounds per square foot on the tree. At that level, the trees are just falling apart. A tornado, a hurricane, these things will rip the tree apart because we burn through all the safety factors of structure that the tree has. Now, what are the damages that we see in trees? Well, in branches, about 5% is due to included bark, included periderm. About 10% is because you thinned out the branch and just left a tuft of foliage on the outer end. That's called lion's tailing. 10% is because you left too big a branch on, codominance. Big branches are weaker in relative proportion than smaller branches hooked to the same size tree. We got dead branches out there and overextended branches, and we got decay in branches. All of these lead to major storm damage. The other thing that we have out there is unbalanced load, asymmetrical trees. You got 70% of your foliage on one side of the tree compared to the other. That is an off balance, asymmetrical, unbalanced load. And instead of just bending in that lopsided crown, it twists. And as it twists, it breaks loose and causes storm damage. Now, one of the things that we do in pruning that we shouldn't, is we have a tendency to prune lower branches and raise the crown over time. Every spring you buy a new saw, it's nice and sharp. You just have to go out and cut the lower branches off of a tree. That is not a good thing structurally for the tree from both a biomechanical standpoint and a biology standpoint. So this is live crown ratio, how much of the entire height of the tree is in live crown. And this is the abusive zone for pruning. In the old days, we used to say, well, don't go more than 25% of crown raising, 25% of the crown. Don't raise that in 1 year. That is way too much on most trees. So if the tree only has a little tuft at the end, you can't be taking 25% of that off. So do not raise your crown very much, because it will biologically starve the tree. It also messes with the structure of the tree. This is live crown ratios on trees, and we have raised the crown. We've taken off the bottom stems. And if you notice, and again, for a lot of people, this blows their mind, as you raise the crown, you're taking off those branches. So people think, well, I should have less load from wind, less damage from storms. You do not. You increase the load when you crown raise. You shouldn't be doing that. Crown reduction, on the other hand, shrinking the crown. If you shrink the crown, lower it down, you decrease wind loads, you decrease functional tree height and wind load centers, you get it closer to the ground, you decrease branch length. This is called a bridging, not removing. Shorten, not remove. If you do crown reduction in the same way I showed you on crown raising, so we're going to take it in the same steps, 1/3, 1/3. Look, in crown reduction, we're actually reducing the wind load on the trees. So crown raising increased wind load, crown reduction reduces. So by pruning, if we tree height reduction, don't go crazy, just a little bit. If we prune back to symmetry, don't have asymmetrical crown mass, and we minimize crown raising from the bottom, we are going to have tree stability and sustainability. Now, we can assess branch attachments when we're out there, and we have something called a branch ratio. How big is the branch compared to where it's hooked, the stem in diameter? That ratio. 66% or 60% of the problem with mechanics of holding a branch on a tree. 25% is the branch angle. What angle is the branch at connected to the tree? And then 15% of the issue is with included periderm, included bark. So branch ratio is the branch diameter over the stem diameter. That gives you a branch ratio. So here are 9 branch ratios. And here is branch ratio 0.1. So the branch diameter compared to stem diameter, branch ratio is 0.1. We do not want branches held on the tree that are greater than 0.66 or higher. A branch ratio that's a branch that's 2/3 as big as the stem that it's hooked to. We do not want that. What about the branch angle? Up in the confluence, what's the angle? The flatter, the more 90 degrees a branch angle is, the stronger the branch, the less failure we have with it. So if you look at down at the 90-degree mark, that is our strongest branch connection, a 90-degree branch angle. We do not want branch angles that are 30 degrees and less, because those are weak branch angles that disrupts the stem node. So we take those branches off. And then finally, included periderm, included bark in the branch connection, in the stem branch node, if we have grown over bark in that area, and it's a lot of it, then that can lead to weakness and storm damage. So if we have a little bit of included paraderm, it's not a big problem until we get up about 28%. It's called a 100-degree angle. So as we get beyond 28% included paraderm, included bark in a confluence, then we have problems. We should cut those branches, abridge them, shorten, not remove. In most cases with big paraderm, we probably should remove the whole branch. So the bottom line is, if we have branch ratios greater than 66, if we have upright branches less than 30 degrees, and if we have included bark, included paraderm greater than 28% of the branch base, those are candidates for removal, for abridging, shorten, not remove, or for removal itself. Now, tree protection. What can we do for tree protection? So if we're going to go out and do tree protection, we got to remember the percentages of our priorities. Our priorities are, you got to prevent it, biggest, just prevent damage. Water your tree. Give it enough space, especially wide soil space. Don't worry about deep, give it wide. Prune it properly at the proper time, in the proper way, and a little bit of fertilizer can be helpful. First of all, a major component is go ahead and protect tree paraderm. To protect the bark. That's the skin of the tree, and you should protect anything that's going to protect the tree. So don't let things damage the bark. Water. There, I said it 5 times. But you can't have water applied without proper drainage. Because if you don't have drainage and you water, you're just going to suffocate your tree. The other thing we need to do is to make sure that we have no maintenance equipment near the root base, the stem, the rooting area. And we don't want activities over the root plate. The structural roots, you don't park your car, you don't trench, you don't put a bench. Excuse me. Nothing over the root base, and then you don't nuke them. You don't put a lot of nitrogen on perennial trees. You want a trickle, not a gusher of fertilization. There are some other things we can put on, but just a tiny, tiny bit. So how do we conclude all of this? Our conclusion means that an arborist enhanced tree is the best tree you can get. We have documented evidence that shows if a tree is cared for, it lasts longer and is safer and lower risk than a tree that's not cared for. So arborist enhanced trees are good things. If you got better trees, there's going to be less risk involved. And you need to care for what you got, the old trees, and don't forget them. But you got to plant for the next 2 generations. You got to get new trees going. So take care of the old guys and plant new guys. And you've got to stop tree abuse, things like topping, tipping. We have got to save our future. And we got to stop old tree abuse and young tree abuse and take care of the sites that they're on. That's it.
Thank you, Kim.
I am having a tremendous thunderstorm here. I don't know if that is causing problems.
Well, I gotta tell you, Griffin actually popped out a couple of times. I'm in Stockbridge. I had to run downstairs because there was a tornado. And so I was like running up and down the stairs trying to listen to my husband screaming in the back. Um, but let's just answer some questions and see how long we can hang out, hopefully to the end.
Great.
There's a question from Lee Cuters. Can you do crown reduction on pine trees?
There are a number of the gymnosperms you cannot do crown reduction with the main leader. You can still do a bridging of side branches, and that can help reduce the extent and reach of the tree. But on gymnosperms, if you touch the main leader, then we start to have a lot of problems. So normally, we don't touch the main leader, and we're very careful about where you plant highly upright gymnosperms.
Perfect. There's another question from Martin Kaufman. Lethal soil temperatures.
As we start to get as we start to get above about 95 degrees soil temperature, not air temperature, but the soil itself, we start to see lesions on roots. And as we get to about 105, we're starting lesions on roots, and it's actually the temperature heat, the infrared is actually bouncing back off up onto the stem, and we'll see lesions on the bottom foot of stem, and those are heat lesions. And in pavements, parking lots, and then in soils, especially when there's not a mulch cover or a turf cover, it's just bare soil, we can get a lot of root damage, but a lot of it is to absorbing roots, which we're going to be gone in the next couple weeks anyway. So short term, it's not a problem. Long term, it's going to lead to decline and death of the tree.
And Martin had a follow-up question. Recommendations for soil aerification around tree roots.
There are a number. You can go to the Warnell site and look up soil compaction manual, and there's a number of suggested treatments there at that publication, at the Warnell publication site. But probably the best in this area is if the soil is moderately or less compacted. You could use an air knife or air spade, and you can do a root reinvigoration process where we're trying to stir the soil with high pressure air, and that stirs it up, and you'll damage the small little roots, and you need to immediately water after you do it, but that will get some more pore space back in. You can also put porous materials and stir that back into the soil as you're using an air knife or air spade, and again, get more pore space back in. If it is a heavily compacted, and if you've ever used an air knife, air spade, sometimes that won't even touch heavy compaction, especially in clay soils. You'll need to use circular soil saws, micro trenchers, and try to do radio trenching and try to break up some of the compaction and try to then backfill with non-compressible materials.
Okay. We have another question. Robert Morgan. I know you didn't cover lightning, but are you for lightning protection in trees?
I am. If you have a historic, culturally significant, or ancient tree, or if the tree is within 30 feet, 20 feet of a building where people are going to be in when it's storming, those are candidates for lightning protection systems. You don't put lightning systems in every tree. It's only the big historic and culturally significant ones, because if you lose them, like a historic tree, there's no coming back. You've lost it. And for the little bit of effort it would take to put lightning systems in trees, it's worth it. Now, the important part of the lightning protection system is always proper grounding. And there are so many lightning systems put in that are sometimes not checked for proper grounding. We put the lightning system in, we assume it's grounded properly, but we never check with a meter, like we would with a building. So we need to do a really good job of professionally installing lightning protection systems. So seek out a professional arborist that does this.
Well, it sounds like we're definitely going to have to count on you, Kim, coming back and giving us a full hour on just that topic, because it's certainly something that gets a lot of attention as we're all hearing this storms all around us.
Well, and especially around recreational sites, golf courses, softball fields, any place animals or people are going to run in a storm, those trees are serious candidates for putting lightning protection systems in. And remember, a lightning system doesn't attract lightning. It just conducts it as fast as possible into the ground, preventing damage to the tree and minimizing impact to the area.
Okay. Well, I had a question of my own. Kim, can you talk a little bit about the extent to which the tree roots, typical tree roots in an urban setting, extend? I know that that's one thing that people tend to underestimate, how wide those roots are. And I guess I'm leading into it, but I want to hear your answer to that.
Well, we have all kinds of problem with infrastructure damage in urban, suburban areas. And the tree roots are only going to be where there's oxygen. So they run just underneath the pavement where there's crusher run or sand. They run along curbing where there's a crack between the soil and the curb, because the curb and the soil are shrinking and swelling at different rates. So anywhere you have soil disruption or a change from soil to another soil or to brick or pavements or anything else, you're inviting roots in. And so many times in more expensive upscale landscapes, we will put root barriers in. And these are hard plastic root barriers that go down about 24 inches to prevent the sidewalk from being buckled, the curb from being pushed in, getting raised joints on pavements. But the tree's roots will run out 2 to 5 times the height of the tree away from the tree. That's our average that we work with. But the colonization of tree roots with an old tree can be hundreds and hundreds of yards.
Wow.
If we look at, I'll pick on Savannah. In Savannah, if you look at some of those monster historic live oaks and follow individual roots, they'll get out to the granite curbing and they'll run along it a block or two. And so even though they're small, they're still out there running. And remember, the active part of the tree is the root. And the passive part is just the top where it gets in the way of CO2 and light. And so we need to, if we want big trees, healthy trees, sustainable trees, we got to have a lot of rooting space.
Absolutely. Martin has another good question. Not that there are any bad questions. They're all great questions. fungal biological use for aeration around trees. And any, I guess, recommendations or research or any ideas about liquid products in particular?
Well, and I guess I didn't understand the question. It said fungal.
Yes, fungal.
Okay. Anything that will produce long-lasting pore space. Remember that fungus, mycelium, and roots utilize pore space. Bacteria and other things utilize the surfaces. So we need to make sure that we have plenty of pore space. So anything we could do that would increase pore space would be great. Now, sometimes in the past, we have had air guns that you stick down into the ground and put water in and use hydraulic pressure to try to make more pore space as the water then flows back out. Sometimes and in some soils that works. In other types of soils, it does not work. For example, in some clay soils, we have such terrible problems with clay soils. Sometimes some of those air guns will put the water liquid in and it will fall back and it will not generate long-term pore space. It's the long-term pore space. On construction sites, many times we will pull a subsoiler through the soil like we would on agricultural crops while the site is still tore up from construction to make sure that we have a base to continue to get pore space moving CO2 out and O2 in.
Okay. Well, we have a couple more minutes till 5. I think the connection is still good.
Well, it's rocking and rolling right here.
It's kind of just raining a little bit in Stockbridge, and I don't know if Griffin is still on.
Well, I am only seeing you on my
on your screen. Yeah. There are 54 participants and we started with like 64. So I think we lost about 10 and some like me have jumped in and out as their weather and things interfered. But I'm not hearing Richie chime in and I think that they had to probably step out. But all of this is being recorded, so do not worry if you jumped in and out. If your connection failed, we will make sure that your record indicates that you have participated in complete 2 hours. So let's thank Kim, Dr. Coder. Thank you so much. We're definitely going to get you again. I could listen to you all day long, and I am sure the rest of the participants can do the same because there is just so much to learn about trees. And we all love trees, and we have to take care of them, as Dr. Coder said. So thank you again, and be safe.